In this video, we're going to be looking at how do we apply our SQL statements in a Delphi program, focusing particularly on the select statement. And this is a part of the Information Technology Grade 12 CAP syllabus. And although this may not be formally assessed in your exams, it is a very useful tool that can help you in your PAT projects. So before we get into how do we apply SQL statements to our Delphi program, we need to be aware of certain components that we need to use. Now, when using a database with Delphi, there were certain components that you had to look at, and you should go look at previous videos for information about that. There was the ADO connection and stuff like that. Now, the one component was an ADO table. Now, instead of the ADO table, we are now going to use the ADOQuery, which can be found in the same component palette where the ADO table is. And so that's, as I said, we're going to use instead of the ADO table, because the ADOQuery component has certain properties that we need when using SQL statements. And the most important property is the SQL property. Now, this SQL property works very similar to, if you remember how a memo control works. Whenever we wanted to add information to a memo control, we would say SQL lines.add, something like that. Now, the same thing happens with an SQL statement. We're first going to clear whatever's inside that SQL property, and then we are going to add lines of SQL statements. If you just add in one line, then that's fine. But if you add if it's quite a long SQL statement, then you want to maybe add the SQL statements line after line, just to make it a little easier for you to type the code. But that's how we are going to be doing that. And thirdly, just to take note, particularly for this example, we're focusing on the select statement. So when you have a select statement, then you are going to open that component once all of the SQL lines have been added, and then you should get your results. Later on in other videos, when we look at the delete and the insert and the update, then we're going to use a different technique where we use the execute SQL property. But we'll get to that later in other videos. So let's have a look at an example. Over here we've got a DB grid where we're going to display our results, and we're going to look at how do we display our SQL results in this DB grid. Now, before we do that, if you remember from previous examples when we've used databases, we normally have a data module. There's my data module over there, and there you can see the components that connect us to that database. Now you've got your connection property, your ADO connection. Now normally in past examples we would have used this ADO table, okay, and that's what we would have used to connect to a particular table in the database that's connected in the connection string of the connection here. But instead of this, we are going to use this query. It's an ADO query. It's found in the same place where you find your ADO table. You get an ADO query. It looks like that. You can see the question mark. That's how you know it is a query. And we connect it exactly the same as we would have done an ADO table, for example. We apply the connection string, or the connection is connected to our ADO connection there, or you could just do the connection string directly if you wanted to. But you'll notice that there's no, I don't think there is a table name. You see there's no table name. There is an active, but there's no table name to set like we had in the ADO table. But we do have this SQL property, and that's where we are going to type our SQL statements. Now I could do it here in the object inspector, but we're going to do it using code. And just like our data source over there, our data source connects to our query, our ADO query, and this is all in the dmmusic_u data module. And this data module is called dmmusic. So we must remember that when we go and use it in this form over here. So when I click on the form, you'll notice if I go to the code, you will notice that at the top here under users, we have added the dmmusic_u, which means this form is connected to that data module, so that now we can use the stuff that's in that data module. We can connect to it because we've got that in our users clause there. Now looking at our scenario here, we've got a button over here, we've got an edit box. I'm not going to touch the edit box yet. I'm just going to do a simple SQL statement, and we want to display it in this DB grid. You'll notice that the DB grid is connected. If you'll see over here, where's the source? think there's a source, data source. It is dm music dot the data source in that data module. So that way we are connected to it. So whatever the results are, we can actually access that query in this form because of that connection that we used at the top. But we must always use the dm music first, because that was the name, if you remember correctly, of the form here, of the data module. That's the name, dm music. So we, on this button, I know it says find first name, but we're going to just do a simple query in the owner table. So here are the steps that we're going to do. The first thing, instead of us having to type dm music every time, I'm going to use the with clause. If you would like to type in dm music every time, you are welcome to. I would like to do it the Mr. Long way, which is shorter. With dm music do, and then we're going to put a begin and end, so that all the statements we write down here, it will attach dm music to in front of that statement. Now the first thing that we need to do is we need to close that query, so that if there is any query running on it currently, that it stops. So we're going to say that query dot close. Then we don't know if this button's been pressed after other SQL statements have been added to it. So just to make sure, we are going to take this query and we're going to take that SQL property, and just like you would do with a member control, we are going to clear it, which means there's no SQL statements in that query at the moment. Our next step is we are going to add the SQL statement that we learned in the other video. So we're going to say SQL statement dot add, just like a member control. And in the text here, we are going to add an SQL statement. I'm going to add a very simple one, a very simple select star from the owner table, just like that. So select everything from the owner table. Once we've done that, we are going to go the query music dot open, which means it's now going to execute that SQL statement and display the results. And because we're doing it in the query, and that query is connected to the data source, and because the DB grid is connected to that data source, the results will be displayed in the DB grid. So let's run the code to see what it looks like. So there's my program. If I click on this button, it will run that query, and there you can see the results in the DB grid. Now that's a very simple query. What happens if you wanted to do a little bit more complicated query, like where owner first name is equal to J? Now remember, J is a text field, so we need to put double quotes around it. You see the double quotes are different to the single quotes. Let's just see what that looks like. So we're going to run the program. There we can see the program. I want to click on run. And now the query is running just the results where J is the owner first name. Now that's great and that's fantastic, but we've got a very static SQL statement there. What happens if we want to use Delphi combined with the SQL statements? For example, we want to be able to type a first name in here and see the results reflected over here. So let's go and click on first this code over here, and instead of it saying J, we wanted to get the values from that edit control. I've got a variable here called SF name. I'm going to use it, SF name, to get the value inside that edit box. Now, I can't remember what that edit box is. I think it is edit first name. And we're going to say dot text. I've got actually so many edit boxes here. I'm not too sure what it's called. Let's double check. Edit find F name. So let's go change that. So edit find F name. There we go. It seems to be fine. Now that is the results from that edit box are now going to be stored in this variable called SF name. Now instead of writing J, I'm going to type SF name like that. Now what you need to be aware of, do you notice how SF name is in blue? Because there's a part of the string there that's in quotes there, the single quotes. Now that's the problem. It's going to refer to SF name like it is. It's going to think that actually it's a variable inside the SQL statement, not necessarily a variable inside Delphi. So now if I take that double quote away and then I add on SF name, now I've constructed a string. I've got my SQL statement, and at the end of it I'm going to add whatever the value is inside this text field. But remember, this is a query that has a text field, and we need to put that in quotes. So what you can do is, if you want to, you could actually go and put the double quotes over there, and then on this side we're going to put a single quote, double quote, single quote, because the previous example, if you remember correctly, looked like this. I'm going to just cut that. Looked like this. So all we are doing is we're replacing that J, closing that string, adding the string value from our text box, our edit control there, and then adding that second double quote. Let's see what the results are for this one. So we run the program. Let's see if there's someone called Bob in our database. Find first name. So now it's dependent on what value we type in here. So if I type in J, it will find the results for J. Now we're going to do something very similar again. We're now going to use a number for this example. So I've already written the code for you for this button. It's very static SQL statement. It's very similar. With DM music, we close, we clear the SQL, we add a statement, select star from owner where the grade equals 8. So let's run that and see if that works. So we say grade equals 8, and there you can see it's only displaying the results where grade is equal to 8. It's leaving out the other results. Now, as I said, that's a very static one. We want to now base it upon what the user puts in this spin edit control, which is called SED find grade. So what I'm going to do on this button is I'm going to use this iGrade variable that I've already created, and I'm going to make it equal to whatever's in that spin edit dot value, and instead of saying the word 8, I'm going to stop that string there, and I'm going to now add grade to that string. Now there's a problem over here. If I run, I'm probably going to get an error. Yeah, there's an error there because grade is an integer, and when we add stuff to this SQL.add, we add in strings. So just like you would add a string to an edit control or a panel caption, we need to construct this like a string. So if we're dealing with text fields or string integer fields or real fields even, although we don't need to put the double quotes around it inside the SQL statement, we just need to make sure if the variables that we are referring to are integers or reals, we need to convert them to string. So in this case, we're going to take it from an int and take it to a string, and that will convert the grade, and then it will add that string grade onto this query. So when we run it and I type in that, we know that works. But if I change it to maybe grade 11, now you can see only the results for grade 11 are displayed. You see, in this way, using these two methods, we can now customize what is displayed based on edit boxes, based on information that the user is given through the Delphi program. Now you could use a filter and you could use all those other means, and there's nothing wrong with using them, but sometimes it is a bit quicker to do it this way. Sometimes you've got a bit more tools in SQL which will make life a little bit easier. Sometimes the filtering is a bit easier. So you need to decide in your PAT projects which method you would want to use. So just to recap, in our data module, instead of using that ADO table component, we are now going to switch to the ADOQuery. And it also has the same connection or connection string set up just like the ADO table. The only difference is we don't need to set up the table name. But there is an SQL property, and in the code, we normally go first we close it, then we clear it, and then we add the lines of SQL statements to it. And once that is done, we then can say that ADOQuery.open in the select statement. There will be other videos showing you how do we do a delete and update and insert using SQL in Delphi, but for this example we just focused on the select statement. If you weren't sure how to do a select statement and all the intricacies of how to use them, go look at our videos on SQL statements. They're at our YouTube channel. You can go follow us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter so that whenever we have new videos you can see when we upload them, and we'd love to hear your comments. And remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way. The examples in a lot of these videos come from the grade 12 Delphi e-notes that were provided by Study Opportunities. These are available in 2014. From 2015 they will have a textbook available which will cover the grade 12 CAPS syllabus. If your teacher is interested in getting these videos, they can contact Study Opportunities at the following website.